Hi boys and girls, we're going to continue with our Boxcar Children book, but first let's review our sounds one more time. We have O-O, which makes the oo sound. Pooch, room, zoom. Remember, O-O is oo. Pooch, room, zoom. We have O-W, which makes the ow sound. Cow, now, how, plow. Again, O-W makes the ow sound. Cow, now, how, plow. And then the other ow sound, which is O-U, hound, sound, shout. Hound, sound, shout. All right. Remember, overheard conversation you're not supposed to hear. Sensation is having to do with your feelings. Description, telling what something looks like, sounds like, feels like. And then we have invitation. And when you send an invitation, you're inviting someone to come. It means you send it out because you hope that people will come to an event that you're having. All right, let's continue reading The Mystery of the Mummy's Curse by Gertrude Chandler Warren. Chapter 9, A Scary Surprise. The Aldens used Pete's office to make their phone calls. Henry had already spoken to a man at their local television news station. Now he was calling the local radio station. "Hello, I'm calling from the Greenfield Museum," Henry said, just as Pete had told him to. "I wanted to remind you about the opening tomorrow night of our latest exhibit, Enter the Mummy's Tomb." "We'll have someone there to cover it," said the man on the other end. "Great," said Henry, hanging up the phone. Jessie checked the radio station off her list. "Next is the Greenfield Daily News, the local paper," said Jessie. "The number is 555-6444. Henry dialed and listened to the phone ring a few times. Then a woman answered. "Hello, Greenfield Daily News," she said. "Can I help you?" "Hello," Henry said. "I'm calling from the Greenfield Museum to remind you of our opening tomorrow night." "Enter the Mummy's Tomb," said the woman. "Don't worry, we'll definitely send a reporter and a photographer." "Yes, thank you," he said, sounding puzzled. He hung up the phone. "What's the matter, Henry?" Benny asked. "That was strange," he said. "Why? What did they say at the newspaper office?" Violet asked. "It wasn't what the woman said," Henry said slowly. "It was her voice. It sounded so familiar." "Maybe it was some friend of grandfather's," Benny suggested. "Maybe," said Henry, puzzled. "Anyway, we have a few more names to call," Jessie reminded him. The children were finishing the phone calls when Dr. Snood came in. "Where's Pete?" he asked. "He's getting lunch," Jessie said. "He asked us to make some phone calls about the opening." Dr. Snood turned and started to leave. He called over his shoulder. "Does Dr. Dickerson have everything ready?" "Yes, she does," Henry said. Dr. Snood stopped abruptly and turned around. He looked at Henry strangely. "She?" he repeated. "Sam Dickerson is a woman?" "Haven't you met her?" Jessie asked. Dr. Snood shook his head. "I've been so busy the past 2 weeks. Whenever I've gone up there, Dr. Dickerson hasn't been in. Pete scheduled a meeting for the 3 of us, and..." He paused and then said awkwardly, "She couldn't come. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I saw the exhibit and it looks excellent." He walked slowly out of Pete's office. "That's weird. He's never even met her," said Violet. "Well, Sam did keep some pretty strange hours," Jessie pointed out and placed the list on Pete's desk. "She'd come in late, leave all of a sudden, you know." The Aldens left the office and went back upstairs. As they entered the prep room, Sam was standing there talking on the phone. "Oh, you'll love this little cat," she was saying to the person on the other end. When she saw the children, she quickly stopped talking. "I'll speak to you later." She hung up the phone. "I was telling my friend about the new kitten I just got," Sam explained. "Another one?" Jessie said. "I couldn't resist," said Sam. She picked up her bag and put it over her shoulder. "Everything's ready for tomorrow. I'm heading home now." "Hey, wait a minute," Benny said, noticing that the coffin at the back of the room. "What about the mummy? Isn't that going to be part of the exhibit?" "Of course," Sam said. "We'll move the coffin in tomorrow and open the lid. See you tomorrow at 7. Lock up when you go." She headed off down the hall. The Aldens picked up their backpacks. "Well, tomorrow's the day," Jessie said, "and the exhibit's all ready." "Looks like we beat the mummy's curse," Henry said, giving Benny a playful punch on the shoulder. Before he left, Benny took one last look around the prep room. At the back of the room was the brightly painted coffin. Benny walked over and gently placed his fingers on the edge of the lid, which was shut tight. "Good night, Mummy," Benny whispered. "Tomorrow's your big day." The next day, the Aldens were at home eating lunch when Benny said, "I can't wait until tonight to see the opening of the exhibit. I just hope nothing else goes wrong," said Violet. "Maybe we could stop in and see if they need any last-minute help," Jessie said. The Aldens biked over to the museum. When they arrived, they found Pete and Dr. Snood in the lobby. Pete was standing beside a pair of signs that read, "Enter the Mummy's Tomb, upstairs exhibit hall, opening at 7 o'clock this evening, by invitation only." The signs were mounted on sturdy metal stands. With them was a pair of metal poles linked by red velvet rope. "Hello," Pete said when he saw the children. Dr. Snood said nothing. "Any last-minute jobs need to be done?" Henry asked. "None that I can think of," said Pete. He looked at Dr. Snood, who shook his head. "Sam isn't coming in until later, and we haven't even gone upstairs yet." Pete placed one of the signs in the center of the lobby next to the main desk. He stood back to see how it looked. Then he turned to the Aldens. "Actually, there is something. Can you put these up in the front of the entrance upstairs so no one will go in until tonight?" He motioned to the sign and the velvet rope. "We'd be happy to," Henry said, picking up the sign. Jessie and Violet each took one of the metal poles. They walked slowly upstairs. As they came down the hall, they could see both the prep room and the exhibit hall were dark and deserted. But when they reached the prep room, they stopped short. Something was wrong. The door of the prep room was open. The children had locked the door before they'd left the night before. Who would have opened it? Pete said Sam wasn't in yet, and he and Dr. Snood hadn't been upstairs that morning. The only other person who would have a key was a security guard, and she had no reason to go up there. Had someone broken into the prep room? The children looked at each other silently. "What's going on?" Henry said quietly. Jessie shrugged her shoulders. "Hello?" Henry called, slowly pushing the door open further. The door creaked as it slowly swung open, and here's a picture of them going into the door. The Aldens peered into the dark room. Everything looked just as they had left it the evening before. Sam's papers were stacked neatly on her desk. Her chair was pushed in beneath. The coffin was still in the back of the room. Jessie bent down and studied the lock on the door. At last, Violet asked what they were all wondering. "Did someone break in?" "Looks that way," Henry said. "We locked the door last night, so whoever it was must have picked the lock." "Wait a minute," Jessie said suddenly. "If someone's trying to get in, they picked the lock from the outside, right?" she asked. "They'd have to," said Henry. "Well, look at these scratch marks." The children bent and looked where Jessie was pointing. "So?" Benny asked. "If someone was trying to get in, he or she would be on the outside of the door, right?" Jessie asked. "But the scratches are on the inside." "So this lock was picked from the inside," Henry said. "So that means," Violet began. "Someone was trying to break out," said Jessie. The children looked back into the room. They looked all the way down to the other end where the coffin lay. And then they noticed something they hadn't noticed before. Something even more frightening than the picked lock. The lid of the coffin was open. Oh my goodness, that is a scary surprise. Does that mean it's the mummy who's come out of the coffin trying to get out? I don't know. It'll be interesting. We'll read some more tomorrow. Thanks for listening.